Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Allen, and you are listening to or watching the Paul Allen's Disasterpiece podcast. Did not stutter over my words one time in that sentence. I am with Bret Hopkins, who is a writer and an actor from Bloomington, Indiana.
Frankfort, Kentucky.
Could not have been any farther from Frankfort, Kentucky. We are filming in Bloomington, is the difference there. Um,
Just across the river.
Not too far.
That's right.
Brett, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Paul? Thanks for having me on.
Doing great, and it is my pleasure. We have been trying to set this up for quite a while. We initially talked about this a few months ago, so I am very glad that we get to finally sit down and have this conversation about you and about your work and really get the people out there acquainted with you because I have a feeling that people are going to be knowing your name very soon.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So the first thing we're going to get into is your book, which is, of course, When the Cumberland Sang.
That's right.
So let's just dive right into it. When did you start writing this book?
Right. So about 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, I was actually on kind of a weekend vacation in Nashville. I went with my sister and my niece. My niece had been wanting to see Nashville for a while, so I went down there
Mhm.
with them. And as the cliche goes, a light bulb just kind of went off in my mind. We were there over the summer, and of course, Nashville is one of the nicest cities in the world to visit. The country music scene has really, I think, brought a lot of kind of the entertainment industry across the board into Nashville. And it's just such a
Mhm.
beautiful city, and the people there are so wonderful. And I think anyone who's been to Nashville will really probably tell you the same thing, that it's just a really fun city to go to. And I had this, without giving away too much of the plot, I just had this idea of a character kind of encountering kind of some ghosts here and there in the
Mhm.
story. And I made the decision to make my uncle, who is no longer living, the main character. And, I don't remember exactly what inspired me to do that, but in hindsight, I'm really glad that I did, because it made me really passionate about writing the story to the best of my ability. And
Mhm.
my father and his side of the family are from Harlan, Kentucky, which is in kind of far eastern Kentucky, sort of on the
Mhm.
Tennessee Virginia border. And,
Mhm.
I can remember that even as a kid, going to family get-togethers, that the stories you would hear about from aunts, uncles, and relatives. I mean, it was just really incredible to hear just how people live their lives. And, this was an age where they had party line phones, which I
Mhm.
didn't even know what a party line phone was until many years later, where you could pick up the phone and hear people in your neighborhood having conversations if they were on the phone before you picked it up. And it just all kinds of things like that. And it really gave me an opportunity to incorporate some true family stories into an overall fictional narrative. And so
Mhm.
before I started writing, I looked up some interviews from some of my favorite writers, and about the advice that they had to anyone who's planning to write a story. And the one thing that they all said is to write about what you know. That,
Mhm.
as a general rule, if you don't know anything about rocket science, then maybe pick a subject that you know a little
Mhm.
bit more about. And so, from my background, I played drums in the school band from sixth grade all the way through my first year of college. I was in a marching band, concert band, jazz band. And so, music was something that I was pretty familiar with. And so, I decided to make my main character a drummer. And then I had something that I could write about that I felt like I was pretty knowledgeable about. And with the story, part of the story taking place in Nashville, it really kind of made sense to tie in the theme of country music.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, when I started selling the book a couple years ago at a book festival in my hometown in Frankfurt, I was describing the book to a customer and I said, it's about some true family stories growing up, and it's becomes kind of a boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy pursues girl kind of story. And I said, he encounters some ghosts along the way and has some adventures, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, "So your book is a country music song." And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, that's really a perfect way to describe it. So it was really interesting how it all came together. And I will certainly give credit where credit is due. I was trying to come up with a catchy name for the title, and I was talking to my sister and my niece about it, and we all kind of decided, well, the story starts out in Harlan and ends up in Nashville, and the Cumberland River actually starts in Harlan and flows into Nashville. And so we felt like having Cumberland in the title was a really good idea. And then
Mm-hmm.
my niece just kind of came up with the idea, how about calling it When the Cumberland Sing? And we were like, ooh, that's a good title.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. So where can people buy this book?
It's available on Amazon. If on departments on Amazon's website, if you click on books and do a search for When the Cumberland Sing, it should come up there.
Mm-hmm. I love how you told this story of how you wrote this, because that's one thing that I love to do is put in like real family stories into at least some of my scripts. Obviously not like The First Harvest or anything like that. um
Right.
but I love to use real life to influence my art. And so to hear that you did that, it, alone like that, not only is really cool, but it makes me curious as to what some of these stories are. And whenever I pick it up and read it, now I guess a clarifying question in that regard would be, are all of the stories based off of real family stories, or did you kind of throw in some that you just came up with on your own?
Most of the stories in here, and especially particularly the ones that take place in the first part of the story in Harlan, Kentucky, a lot of those stories in the book are based on true stories. And I actually kind of semi joke around with people that I tell them, when you're reading the book and you wonder, well, what stories are true and which ones are kind of fiction, and I'll say the ones that you think that can't possibly have happened, those are probably the true
Hmm.
ones.
Right. Well, I can't wait to read this and see those stories and just see like the book as a whole. The premise I think is really cool, and I haven't personally read any books like that, so that'll be new territory for me. I usually stick to horror,
Hmm.
so I really like that.
And there are
Any
absolutely some horror elements in this story. It's
mm,
one of those things where I wanted it to have as much an appeal to an audience as I possibly could. And so
mm,
I wanted it to have a little something in it for everyone to enjoy.
mm,
So if you like romance, there's romance in it. If you like horror, there's some horror in it. If you like stories about music and kind of especially the history of country music, there's a lot of that in it. So it's a fun
mm,
story, and I think that everyone that gets a chance to read it will really enjoy it.
mm. Yeah, I love books that it doesn't matter what your preferred genre is, there's something in there for you. And I think that that is something that makes some older books stand out from some of the newer ones, at least that I've read. Um, it feels like that's kind of become lost over the past few years.
Hmm.
And so to hear that there is something in this book for everyone, I really like that, and I encourage everybody watching and listening to go to Amazon. I'll go myself and put a link in the comments and buy this book. Support Brett. I think that supporting local authors, supporting independent authors is huge, and we all should do it as much as we can.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great to do, that's for sure.
do you have any plans for either a sequel or another book entirely?
Actually, I do. I'm actually thinking about writing a story about my grandfather on the other side of my family
Hmm.
because he was a World War II veteran and also was very active in sports. And
Hmm.
his story as well, I actually interviewed him once for a school paper when I was in seventh grade, and he told me some war stories, and my folks told me that I was probably the only person that he'd ever told that to. And so I was
Hmm.
really glad that I wrote down what he had corresponded to me and kind of in the early stages of planning out the story, but it's something that I'm really excited about writing about.
Hmm.
And it's actually something that I encourage everyone to do is to write down stories of their life and even some of their experiences with family or friends throughout the year because I truly believe that everyone has a story to tell. And if people think that
Hmm.
their lives are not interesting, I assure you they are.
Hmm. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of um, this is kind of a little segue. I promise I'll get back to topic.
No problem.
There's a podcaster named Theo Vaughn, and he is known for bringing non-celebrities, I'll say, onto his show. And to me, it's almost more fascinating to hear the stories of people that nobody has heard of. I think that that's so fascinating, and I fully agree. Everyone has a story. Even if you feel like you don't have a story, someone out there is going to be entertained by your story.
Absolutely.
Some people may listen to it and relate. Some people, some people may laugh, might have some comedic moments. Um, it ultimately, everyone does have a story, and everyone should share that story. And
Couldn't agree more.
especially in cases like with your grandfather, where he told certain stories. Like I had that relationship with my grandfather as well. And of course my grandfather has since passed, and so to still hold on to those stories means everything. So even if you feel like you don't have a story, still tell it anyway, because people do cherish that. People do cherish those memories.
Absolutely.
So I know that you're in the early stages with that. So I'm assuming well, I'll phrase it this way. Do you have an anticipated year that you might hope to release this, or is it just too early?
Well, probably too early right now. I know that this book, off and on, took me 2 years to complete,
Hmm.
which it probably wouldn't have taken that long had I really sat down and just worked kind of ferociously at getting my thoughts on paper. But I really wasn't in a hurry to write this story because, I would write maybe a couple pages and then I would have another idea that would kind of alter what I had just written, and I would go
Hmm.
back and change some things. And for me, it was particularly fun with this story not to plan out the plot way in advance.
Hmm.
And again, without giving away too much of the story, that, I would kind of write things as ideas came to me. Like there's a scene where they're in a hotel in Nashville and the characters get on an elevator. And originally, I was going to end the chapter where they get on the elevator and start the next one where they're on the next floor. But once I got to that point in the story, I decided to follow the characters into the elevator. And so
Hmm.
by doing that, something has to happen. And so I
Mhm.
thought, okay, what's something really interesting that can happen on an elevator? And of course, a confined space where, in theory, you don't have any control when that box starts moving. There's a lot of things literary wise that you can have a lot of fun with a story
Mhm.
like that. So, and there were countless times writing this book that I had planned on knowing what I was going to write, but then when I did start writing, it's like I would have an idea that took it off in a completely different direction.
Mhm.
But, I went with that because I thought, well, it could be fun if then this happens and then this happens. And it kind of gave it some spontaneity for me too, writing it, not knowing what was going to happen next.
Mhm. Kind of letting it write itself almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I initially didn't take that approach with my writing. I I am in my earlier work, I'm more known for planning things out even years in advance. And I even kind of did that a little bit with the First Harvest series as well. Um, but I found it really hard to stick with that. And like we tried writing Sister Sylvan, which is, of course, the sequel. We tried writing that to follow the original storyline that I'd come up with 2, 3 years ago, but then it ultimately just didn't really stick. And so now I've actually gone and completely rewritten it and let it write itself. And it's so much better,
hmm
not
And
no
planning out
shade.
stories is a
Hmm.
totally legitimate way to tell a story as well. I mean, when it
Hmm.
comes to art, there's just no right or wrong way to do something.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and of course, no shade to the old script because it was really, really good too. But like both methods have their pros and cons. And for this, it felt like there was more pros.
Sure.
Um, so for your writing, I'm really excited to, of course, pick up your first book, and whenever you write the second book, I can't wait to see that too, because I am a fan of anything that has to do with war history. I always have been, so I'm very, very eager to read that. So that means you got to get to work on it soon.
It does, for sure. Hopefully, I will have that sooner than later.
Absolutely. So and this is just me as a writer being curious and knowing that some of my audience is writers and they'll be curious. How did you get your book on Amazon? Like, is it just a self-published deal or?
Yeah, it's self-published, and Amazon just made it really easy for me to
Mhm.
get it on there and get it distributed. It was one of those things where once I'd gotten it written, I was really in a hurry to get it published soon as possible, and Amazon just made it really easy.
Mhm. I like that. I've published a couple of things through a site known as Bookrix,
hmm
and I mean it was easy and painless, but it's all digital.
Right.
And so like I've been kind of thinking to myself, okay, how can I take that next step and get it to be a physical release? And so I love that you were able to do that. And I hope that the book has done well. And I certainly hope after this podcast that you get even more sales.
Absolutely. And even when it comes to publishing books, there's no right or wrong way to go about it.
Hmm.
Some people go the literary agent route, others choose to self-publish. It's just however you choose to get your story told.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think so long as the story gets out there is the most important thing. So, to kind of segue just a little bit, we know that you've got your novel. Have you dabbled in script writing?
I have not. It's something that I've thought about doing and just have really not come up with an idea yet that's really gotten my attention as, this would be a great film or short story, but it's something that I'm
Mhm.
very interested in doing.
Mhm. I kind of did. Well, I wrote more so books first than scripts. I only started writing I only started writing scripts back about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago or so. Um, it was a very interesting transition. It's an entirely different animal, as I'm sure you know, as an actor, reading a script is so much different than reading a book, and the writing process, at least for me, was entirely different. So I'd be curious to see what you come up with for a script. Is there any chance that you might try to turn your book into a movie?
Wow. I had not thought about that. If that opportunity were to present itself, not getting too far ahead of myself,
Hmm.
that is something that I would certainly be open to exploring.
Hmm. I think that that would be really cool. I mean, based off of what you've said about the story, I think that it would be cool not just to be able to read it, but to watch it as well. It just sounds really engaging, and you know that that's my style of cinema. You know, I think that it would be a really cool watch. Obviously, reading it first, um, and then being able to see it would be cool. But
Well, and
getting
as a
into
first-time
mhm,
writer, there's always a little bit of apprehension that I think of, how
mhm,
are people going to respond to this? I think it's good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone else is going to think that. And so, the first draft that I wrote of it, I showed to a couple family members, and they read it, and luckily for me, really enjoyed it. And I
mhm,
said, now be honest, if there are things in it you don't think are, need to be improved or are kind of mediocre, you can tell me. It's not going to hurt my feelings. And they said, no, no,
mhm,
it's actually really good. So at that
mhm,
point, I felt like I had a good story.
mhm. So, kind of segueing into film now, how did you get your start in acting? I know that that's kind of a generic question to start, but I'm genuinely curious. uh, Whenever I talk to actors, how they got their start. Like, what was that moment that made them think, I want to be an actor?
Yeah. When I was a kid, my earliest memory of watching movies and really kind of connecting to them, there were a couple in particular. I think it was I was watching when I was at home, I was watching Indiana Jones and the Last
Hmm.
Crusade and also the Tim Burton Michael Keaton Batman movie. And there
Hmm.
was just something about seeing those two characters on screen that made me be like, I want to be those characters.
Hmm.
And later on in life, it was kind of a realization that if I became an actor, that I might someday get a chance to do that. And then in college, I remember it was my second or third year in college that being bitten by the acting bug, well, for me, it was like I was bitten by a king cobra
Yeah.
acting bug. I mean, it was just like, this is what I want to really try to do. And kind of being in the right place at the right time, I joined up with a local agency and a couple of directors, they were brothers at the time, John Will and Turner Clay. They were making an action movie around Kentucky, and I auditioned for the role of the villain, and they liked my look for it, and they liked my reading, and they offered me the
Hmm.
role. The movie was called Interception,
Hmm.
and gosh, it's one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in my life. It's like, I mean, it's like I get to go to work today as an
Hmm.
actor and being on set and being on camera and seeing how it all comes together is just it was one of those things where it was like I could really do a whole lot more of this, and the
Hmm.
more that I do it, the more that I enjoy it. And so yeah, that's where it got started from, and then made a couple more connections in the business. And since then, I was on an episode of Snapped Killer Couples on
Hmm.
the Oxygen channel. And have had some small roles in some major films recently, and hopefully there will be many more to come because it's something that I just really enjoy doing, creating a character and using my imagination to bring that character to life.
Hmm.
It's a whole lot of fun to do.
Absolutely. And so the movie that you mentioned, the was it a movie or short? I'm so sorry. I think you cut out a little bit whenever you were talking about it. Interception.
Yes, Interception is
Hmm.
the name of the movie. I think it's still available on Amazon. We filmed it
Hmm.
it's probably been almost 15 years ago
Hmm.
now.
I'll have to check that out too. What is that one about?
It is about a kind of everyday average Joe kind of guy who works for an IT company. He gets a hold of a disc that kind of revolutionizes the way that the military uses bombs. And
Hmm.
my character, who is the villain in the movie, steals it for his own kind of jealous, maniacal purposes, and the rest of the movie becomes kind of a cat and mouse
Hmm.
chase throughout the scene. So really pure action movie, but also with some comedy thrown into it. So
Yeah. I love a movie that it's not necessarily a comedy movie, but it incorporates those elements. Um, one such movie in recent memory is Lisa Frankenstein, which is kind of more of a um, drama slash romance slash not necessarily straight up horror, but they have a lot of comedy sprinkled throughout, and I love movies like that. Um,
absolutely.
so you did Interception, and what was your next step from there? Like once you knew this is what you were going to do, what were some of the steps that you took from there?
Yeah, I started taking some acting classes, and which I've been doing off and on really ever since I started acting because it's something that I want to get as good as I can at the
Hmm.
craft and just constantly trying to improve my ability to give believable performances and bring characters to life and have been lucky enough to land some roles kind of here and there throughout the years and some short films, some feature-length films, and I just really can't get enough of it. And the really neat thing about, of course, Paul, you being in Indiana and myself in Kentucky is that
Hmm.
film production has really picked up in the Southeast and the Midwest pretty considerably the
Hmm.
last several years. And I'm sure this is the case with Indiana too, that in Kentucky, there have been so many more feature films that have come through the area in recent years that it's like,
Hmm.
online or in the paper, it's like there's seems like almost every month there's like a celebrity sighting of a movie star who's filming
Hmm.
a movie here. So it's a really fun time to be an actor right now in the Midwest and Southeast.
Oh yeah. Wasn't Ethan Hawke just filming?
He did. I
Yeah,
think the name of the movie is Wildcat.
yeah, Wildcat. That actually just premiered as well.
It did,
Um,
and Orlando Bloom filmed a movie here recently as well.
mhm. I think that I know a couple of people that were in it as extras.
Cool.
Because I remember one of them posting like screenshots of after the release, of course, um, where like you can see Orlando Bloom, but then in the distance you can kind of see them off in the corner.
Okay,
um,
cool. Yeah.
I oh man, I love that film is picking up here, and you're absolutely right. It is, not even just the bigger studio films, but independent film as well. Um, I've seen a plethora of really talented filmmakers that are making work possible here. Here in Connorsville, even there's two other filmmakers. Um, There's Brandon Townsend and Vigo Johnson who make films here in Connorsville. And it's wild because this is just a small town. There's really not a lot here. We have a bowling alley and a Walmart, and that's about it. Um, Over in Illinois, you have Acrostar Films, and they are constantly putting out amazing movie after amazing movie. And um, even down in Kentucky, we have producers such as like Angela Grimm, actors such as Larissa Bryant, who are making work possible. And I love that. And I love that that's in the Midwest and you no longer have to go over to the West Coast or to New York to
Yeah,
film.
and just about it seems like every major city now in the United States has a filmmaking network. And now, really, just
Mhm.
even as you mentioned, even a lot of small towns now have
Yeah.
filmmaking networks. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of showbiz.
hmm I kind of jumped in at the right time because I only got into it a couple years ago. And, to see it, like, even just in the last 2 years, to see how much it's grown, it's amazing.
It really
And
is.
it's a fun time. Like, I've gotten to see some of what I believe to be the best movies in recent years made right here in Indiana or in Illinois, Kentucky, Ohio. There's actually a major film filming in Ohio right now, one of the bigger studio projects. And the fact that that's here, it's exciting.
It's very exciting.
But speaking of, well, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if this is a studio movie or if it's an independent. I know it's a For King and Country movie, Unsung Hero,
Correct. It is currently playing in theaters.
nationwide, and you happen to be in it for a couple of seconds.
I was. I played a member of the Christian rock band Striper for
Mm-hmm,
one of the scenes in the movie. And gosh, that was such a fun role because it was a concert scene where we
mm-hmm,
were performing a song for the audience. And gosh, it was just so much fun. And I mean, for King and Country, they're such an amazing band.
mm-hmm,
And of course, the movie is about their life and you know, moving from Australia to the United States, and it's a really interesting story.
mm-hmm,
It's inspiring, and yeah, it's I encourage everyone to go and see it.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. I actually found out about the movie from my friend Matthew, and because he's been trying to get me to watch more Christian films here lately,
Hmm.
and so he saw about it because of the new version of To Hell with the Devil, which is of course a Striper classic. Which the new version is of course for King and Country, featuring Lecrae and a little bit of Striper. To be honest, I'm not
A
sure which part
music
was
video, which
Striper.
I am also in.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. I was quite excited whenever I found out that this was a movie and not just a video.
right.
And I also didn't realize you were in that video. Now I have to rewatch it.
Cool.
Um, but so uh for filming a concert scene, did they like actually have you guys playing the song? Was it a full song or was it just like that little snippet that was going to be featured?
It was a full song. Without giving too much of the movie magic away, they they really devised a clever way to play the music so that we could hear it while the song was going on. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
a really neat kind of movie magic thing that the filmmakers did to kind of bring it all together and have the crowd interact with us as we had our
Mm-hmm.
various instruments and that kind of thing. It was just really neat the way that they filmed it, and everyone just had such a great time.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a blast. As a musician myself, the one thing that I have somehow never filmed is a concert video or scene or anything like that. Now I've got to.
Yeah.
So, what are some projects that you have coming up?
Well, coming up, interesting that you mentioned that because we have a short film that I believe you've written and that I'm going
Mhm,
to have a role in called This Cold Black, which I think we're going to
mhm.
be filming that over the summer.
Yep, August 3rd and 4th, I believe.
Yeah. And, that was one of those things where when I got the scenes to audition with, it was just such an interesting premise
Mhm,
for a film. And being able to kind of fill in some of the storytelling with the character that doesn't immediately jump out from the script. And because I think with every film, there is a part of the story that you don't see
mhm,
on camera, and it's kind of the actor's duty and responsibility to fill in that part of the story that is unseen.
mhm,
And it's kind of the subtext of the story. And with I remember that with the size that you sent me for the audition, there were just so many elements that I was able to incorporate into the character, and just really a great strong script.
mhm. That was one I actually wrote it about a year ago or so. Um, I had remembered talking to Holly Anspaugh, who's playing Jamie in this
She's
Cold Black.
amazing.
I cannot say enough positive about Holly. She is incredible.
She
But
is.
I remember hearing her talking about wanting to play, perhaps not to spoil the script, a different role. And I thought to myself, I need to make this happen. So I started writing this Cold Black, which another motivation I had for it was I at that point everything that I had written I had been in, and I wanted to do a script as well that I was not in. So that is kind of how this Cold Black came about. And then she recommended you for the role of Wes, and I was like, okay. Then we auditioned you, and I was like, okay. It was very, very, very clear very early on that you were the right pick for Wes.
Oh, thank you.
And I can't wait to see what you do with that. I can't wait to get on set and film it and um yeah, just see what we do with it.
And Paul, props to you for writing an amazing script with great characters. Because,
I
I mean, just reading the size that you sent me, I was thinking this is going to be a great film.
mhm. I I am never one to toot my own horn, but this is one of my favorite scripts I've done. I really enjoy it, and the fact that the parts that I wrote initially only took like a day to write. It just once that initial idea hit, the rest went from there. And then I recently did some rewriting actually with Holly, and just it's so much better even now. And it was already good to begin with, but it, what we have is going to be a really, really solid short.
And Holly's
And
range as an actor is just incredible.
mm,
She is so talented.
she can come off as like that sweet wife in one project and then play a terrifying, terrifying priestess in another. Not to do a not so a subtle shout out to the priestess, which is an amazing short film.
Absolutely.
If y'all haven't heard of the priestess, go on YouTube and look it up. It is a great short. Um, she is she's going to do really well with this script. Um, aside from this Cold Black, and there is another project that we can't quite talk about just yet. But aside from those, do you have any other projects coming up, film or otherwise?
I, with the nature of the business, it's really kind of hard to predict where things will go because, sometimes I think for the majority of aspiring actors that, you can go a month or two without any auditions, and then a week comes up where you have four auditions in a week. And it just depends on what filmmakers are looking for and where they're filming. And, opportunities in this area are just kind of popping up left and right.
Mhm.
So, we'll just see where things go from here.
Absolutely. Is there anywhere that people can follow you just to follow along with your journey? Whether it's more about a future book or your acting journey.
Yeah, I have a Facebook page where people can find me and follow what I'm doing on there. And my Instagram is real Bret Hopkins, and
Hmm.
I update that pretty consistently about what I have in the works and current things that I'm working on. I've been in a couple music videos pretty recently that are kind of in the final stages of being completed and being published. And so I'll be putting those on my social media profiles once those are available. So, just kind of keeping the wheels rolling.
Absolutely. Now, one final question for you. For anybody who's listening that they are just getting into writing or they're wanting to get into film, what advice can you give to anybody who wants to take that step?
Yeah, well, for writers, I would say don't put it off. Don't think, well, I don't have much of a story right now. I'll just wait until, I have a really good plot that I can go with. Just start writing down your thoughts. You might not necessarily know where you're going with it. It might not even make sense right at first, but as you continue to develop your story, it could make sense when you write additional scenes into it. And, before you know it, you've come up with a really interesting story. And for actors, especially or aspiring actors, there are local agencies that you can join up with. And for acting classes, I will say that Jim Doherty is
Mhm.
a great resource. He's one of my acting instructors, and a lot of what I've learned about this business, I learned directly from Jim. He runs the online Actors Academy. It's an online Zoom class that meets about once a week. And Jim, in addition to being a really good actor himself, he's also a great filmmaker, and he really knows the ins and outs of the business, and he will help guide aspiring actors in the right direction of where they are in their careers and the next steps that they can take in trying to get to the stages that they want to be in their career.
Mhm. Yeah, Jim is great. I haven't yet been able to attend any of his classes. I am hoping to very soon. I've been able to speak with him just a little bit through Messenger and whatnot, and he is, one thing that I was cautious about whenever I started doing film was at that point I kind of got nervous meeting new people. Now it's like cakewalk, but then it was like, oh gosh, like is this person going to be, are they going to be friendly? Are they going to be open to talking and actually like helping? And Jim has always just been so open and kind and eager to help. Um, and side note for those who may need headshots, he also is a really good photographer.
He is. He's a great photographer. Jim wears many hats and he's such a people person.
Hmm. Yeah, he is a jack of all trades in this industry, and I I absolutely as well encourage anybody to speak with him and get into his courses. But Brett, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me a little bit today. It
Absolutely.
was
It was a
a
great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
I had a great time talking to you, brother. And again, we will link the book in the comments and of course in the post whenever we post the video as well. Please go and buy Brett's book and follow his journey. This man, I'm telling you, you're gonna see him in films for many years to come. And if you don't know who he is yet, you will in a few years.
Thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. You have a great rest of your night. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you in the next episode.